Hi, welcome back to another video for our application development course for Android using Kotlin. In this video, we're going to create this application here. So this is a temperature conversion app that's going to teach you several things about the user interface and including the concept of a view model. Let's take a look at the app in action. So I'm looking here at Android Studio and I've got the current app running that we're going to create. So here's how it's going to work. If I have the temperature conversion and I put in a number, let's see, let's try 32 and convert it to Celsius, you can see predictably that it goes to 0. I can also switch this. So if 32 Celsius is converted to Fahrenheit, that comes out to 90 degrees. Let's try one more. Let's try the body temperature. I think it's 98 degrees, right? And that is not correct. We needed to switch it to 98 Fahrenheit and convert that to Celsius, and there we get 37. Okay, so this here is the app itself. So the interesting part for a programmer is not so much can you convert temperatures, but can you manage a user interface? So some of the challenges that you're going to face if you had to build this app would be these objectives right here. So you're going to see how we handle text input. It's not as easy as you think it is. We're going to do a little styling. We're going to put in that toggle switch and have a programmable button. And then the concept that probably will surprise you the most is we're going to use something called a view model to handle the data that's behind our user interface. So we'll describe what a view model is when we get to the programming part. But those are the objectives that you'll see if you follow through on this lesson. So just a quick review of where we're going in this entire course. You can see we're on this section here called view models. So what's ahead are several other different subjects, so make sure that you subscribe so that you can get a comprehensive view of how to build Android apps using Kotlin. All right, so let's return to Android Studio, and I'm going to show you a few features that we're going to program, and then we'll start from scratch. So you can see that I have a class in here called ViewModel for temperatures. That's going to be important, and let's just scroll through it quickly. You can see that it has several variables. It has a function to calculate the toggling of the switch here, this toggle right here. And then we also have a calculation down here that is called calculate the conversion. And you can see that we're going to do some math. And then we also have try and catch, which is going to prevent errors from crashing our app. So that's what's ahead. All right, so let's start with a new project. So let's go to File and choose New Project. And we're going to select the empty project and then empty activity and go ahead and name it. So you can see that I'm choosing the name temperature conversion app, and the package name has my name in it and then the location here. And I'm choosing the, let's go to the Lollipop, which is the oldest version of our Android systems, and choose Finish. Now, just in case there are some issues with what this tutorial teaches and what you experience, let's take a look at my Gradle files. You'll see which versions that I'm running on this tutorial. So you can see here in the main project Gradle, I have 8 and 8 and 1.7. So if you get different results for any reason, you could come back and modify these numbers to match my tutorial, and maybe you'll fix the problem. So you can see I chose 21 as the min. And for the dependencies, these are usually critical down here to get the right version numbers. So I don't expect that you'll find that you need to change these if you've got a more modern version of Android Studio. But if you do encounter problems, this is one place to try to resolve them. So the first thing I'm going to do is clear out some stuff here. So I'm going to get rid of the preview and just go with greeting. And I'm going to rename this as just something simple like my app, and then take out the contents and then call my app up here. Okay, so that's just simplifying the predefined code that we've been given. So the first thing that I'm going to build in this application is called a view model. So let's describe what it is before we start coding it. So a view model has two words in it, of course. It has the word view and the word model. So view relates to our user interface, and then model relates to a data class. So it is a class that is responsible to handle the data and the actions with an interface. So put that into real concrete examples. Let's look at our app again. So if I ask you the question, how many data points do you need to track or modify in this user interface? So let's point them out. First of all, you can see that we have a switch, and a switch always refers to a true-false value, a Boolean, so it's a toggle. The second is we have a text box, so we are going to get some user input, and in this case we're looking for a number. And then we have an output. We're going to have a calculated answer that we need to show. And is that it? Is that all of it? No, there's one more. There is a button. And so that button will have a click function. So in the preview, I showed you some of the things that we're going to program in this view model. So all of this kind of fits together in the same package. You could handle each one of these as a separate variable, but a view model allows us to combine them. So a view model is a class with properties and methods to manage the user interface data. So if I were to come up with a view model for this thing, I would say the temperature conversion app has to have a property called isFahrenheit. It's a Boolean value. It would have to have a float, or I think we're going to use integers in this example, but a number that is our calculated temperature. We're going to have a function that is going to handle the switching of the toggle, so the true-false. And then we also have one more, which is going to be a function that is going to calculate our answer. So we'll either transform from a Fahrenheit to a Celsius or vice versa. So if you were to design a view model, you might come up with this. You might have slightly different options, but what you want to do when you design a view model is to identify all of the data that's in a user interface and the possible functions that go with it. So that's what we're going to build next. So let's go back into our studio and let's go to the main package. And let's create a new Kotlin class. Now I could call this thing view model, but just to be specific, I'm going to say view model for temperatures. So there is a special class that we are going to extend, and it's called ViewModel. So let's put a colon and the word ViewModel with a parentheses. And this will allow us to track the items that are going to be defined in a minute. So just to be doubly obvious, I'm going to put some comments in here so you can see where we're going. So this class will manage the values displayed on the user interface. So first of all, I'm going to provide two different properties. So one is called isFahrenheit, which is a Boolean value, and then the other is called the converted temperature, which will be the result of calculating the conversion from Fahrenheit to Celsius and vice versa. Now you have to provide a default value, so I'm going to just take the Copilot's suggestion and say true, and the other one is a string, that's an empty string. So let's put in some comments to say what this is. So this is the state of the toggle switch. Let's interpret true to be Fahrenheit and false to be Celsius. All right, so now we've fallen into a trap based on what code the editor has given to us. I'm going to change some values here and then describe them in a second. So instead of putting in there Boolean equals true, I'm going to have a delegate, it's called, and I'm going to take the suggestion here that says let's choose a mutable state of true. And let's see, it looks like I have some importing to do. And let's see, do I have to import that again? Seems like I do. What's the matter here? Let's try it a third time. This time it works. So we have up here the import. So now let's describe what this is all about. What difference is there between equals a Boolean and this thing called mutable state of true? So let's take a look at some side notes here. So first of all, the word by that I used in there instead of an equal sign has nothing to do with composing, but it is all about delegated properties. And so it just saves us some extra typing. I'll show you an example of that maybe in another time here, but we're replacing the equals with by. Now, this here is the new keyword. I don't know if it's new to us, but anyway, it deserves some explanation. So when you see the word mutable state of, think of it as what we may have learned in Kotlin basics in the tutorials, where if you want to have a list that is editable, you can add and remove items to it, we use the word mutable list of. So mutable means changeable. And so this here is obviously a changeable value. And so we wanted to have a changeable value of true. So mutable state is a thing, we'll call it, or a value that holds some contents. And the important part is that Compose, the user interface, the Compose will automatically observe the changes to the value. So what does observing mean? So observing means that the user interface responds to a change automatically. So if you switch a value from false to true, the little toggle switch on the user interface should also move automatically. You don't have to physically go in and program that. It's observing the state of the value. So changing this value to a mutable state of allows the user interface to know what state it should be in. Now the next item down is the converted temperature. And so this is going to be an actual string that we want to use to display on the user interface. So let's also model this as mutable state of, and in this case, it's just a string because it is actually a number that we're trying to display on the screen, but the contents of a text box should be a text. So it's a mutable state of a string. So the string, of course, we're going to start with is empty. So the next function that we're going to add to our view model is called doSwitchToggle. So this event will occur when the person clicks on the toggle item. So what we want to do is simply switch one value to its opposite. So is Fahrenheit is a Boolean value, and so if it's true, it will become false, and if it's false, it will become true. So the opposite of its current value. So the next thing we're trying to set up is called calculate conversion. So what I want to do is take a value from the user interface and then convert it from Fahrenheit to Celsius or vice versa. So this will be called when the button is clicked. So you can see that my Copilot is offering me suggestions. So I'm just going to press tab to take them and then see if they make any sense at all. So I kind of like part of this. It's very nice for me to provide the nice calculation formula, so I don't have to go look those up. But I'm going to modify the first part a little bit differently. So the first thing I want to do is add a try-catch statement. So that way if the user input is not correct, we'll just give them a warning message instead of crashing the app. So at the top we'll say try. We'll do all the things that we try to do. And then at the bottom the catch is to say probably invalid input. So if somebody puts in letters or a blank or something, it just won't be able to do the math. So we'll call that an invalid input. So let's capture the temperature as a value and let's get it from the input box. So we're going to make this into a double. So to double is the conversion. So this could cause an error as well when you try to convert from a string to a double or integer or something. If the input format is wrong, then it'll cause this try catch to trigger. Then in the formula, we want to do a calculation to say, let's take the temperature minus 32 times 5/9, and then the other is temperature times 9/5 plus 32. That's the math from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So initially I had to look this up on the internet to find out what kind of a function is actually used to do this conversion, but my Copilot formatter already knew what this looked like. So now I want to add Fahrenheit to the end of the formula's calculation. So let's go to Google and let's search for what the Unicode symbol is for Fahrenheit. And sure enough, I get this number, which appears to be 2109. So let's go back into our code to use that. So on the second calculation, where we are converting from Celsius to Fahrenheit, we're going to add another piece of character, another code item at the end. So let's do the calculation result, and we'll concatenate on the symbol for Fahrenheit. And you can see that Copilot offers that to me automatically, the little tiny 0 plus the F. Now, if you're not using Copilot, you need to use this Unicode. So let's put in the string where it's \U and then 2109. So that will give us the number that we need for the Unicode symbol for Fahrenheit. Now Copilot's pretty nice here because we're going to use the Unicode again, and this time it seems to sense what I'm trying to do. So the correct symbol is 2103 for Celsius. You could look that up on Google, but you can see that my Code Assist is doing that for me. And there we have it. We've got ourselves a conversion formula that gives us both ways, Fahrenheit to Celsius, Celsius to Fahrenheit, and we're checking for errors. So we've got this whole view model created. Let's go put it into our main activity. So what I want to do is then put it inside here in my app. So let's create a new instance of this. So let's use this in my app. So let's go and create a new instance called ViewModel, and we're going to model it after the view model for temperatures. And it's suggesting that we use the class name, but what I want to do is just say this is a generic view model. Now you notice that as soon as I define it that way, it doesn't work. It says you must create this function. So we are missing a dependency. We're trying to use a view model in our user interface, and I don't think we can do this unless we go and import it. So this is an example where we're going to go look up a library and add it to our Gradle settings file. So I want to go search on Google for ViewModel and Gradle dependency. And let's see, let's scroll down a little bit until we come to Maven repository. I believe this is a good way to find it. Let's click here. And Lifecycle ViewModel Compose is what we're after. Let's pick the newest version. So let's look down here at the results here. We can see the different things. We got Maven, Gradle, we got Gradle Short, and Gradle Kotlin. So I think Gradle Kotlin is probably what we want here. Let's just copy this here. And it already says it's copied. I don't believe it. I'm going to right click and copy it. And let's switch back into our code here. I'm going to the dependencies at the bottom of the screen and pasting. So you can see that we've got runtime only listed, and the other ones are implementation. So I'm actually not quite sure what the difference is, but if we have a problem, I may go and change this from runtime only to the word implementation. Now, from previous experience, I believe that my version right here will cause an error. The current version is 2.6.1, which is the newest we could find. And if we find an error, we'll come back and try an older version. So once you add an item to a Gradle list of dependencies, you have to go to the button called Sync Now. And you watch down here at the bottom and you'll see that the syncing is going on. So it gives maybe a minute or so and it'll be done. Okay, so we've synchronized. Let's go back into main activity and let's see if we can import this now. So I hover over ViewModel and I don't get import. That's strange. So I believe the result is that the word implementation here should be listed as right here as well. So let's put in the word implementation and save it and sync it and try again. Okay, so the synchronization is done. Let's go back to main activity. And this time when I hover over ViewModel, you can see that it knows we can use it as a valid class. So I imported it. And if I go to the top, I notice that it should be in here somewhere. So where is ViewModel? There it is. So we have imported from this item right here. So I just want to doubly make sure we understand what we're doing. We're creating an instance of the ViewModel class that we're going to be using for this interface. So now we're going to create the main interface, and I'm going to contain this into a composable function called main screen, which is not defined yet, so we'll have to fix that in a moment. Main screen is going to have 4 different parameters that come to it. So the first is going to correspond to the is Fahrenheit value. So we'll take that from the ViewModel. The result is the result of the calculation. So that is in the ViewModel. It's called the converted temperatures. And then the next one is called convertTemp, which is a function. So in this case, I'm going to say put it into curly brackets, which means this is an executable inline anonymous function. And we're going to do the calculate conversion function from our ViewModel. And this mysterious thing called it will be explained in a minute. And then finally, we're going to do toggle switch, which is a function also. So it's in the curly brackets. So main screen has 4 different parameters that are going to be defined in just a moment. So since this is undefined, let's go and hover over main screen and let Android Studio do its work. So the suggestion says, do you want to create a composable function? Well, of course I do, so I'll choose that. And you can see that the composable function has several items listed below. Let's look at them one at a time. So the first one here is a Boolean value, correct. The next one is a result, which is a string. This is also correct. This is the result that comes back as with a tagged F or C after the number. ConvertTemp, this is interesting. You notice this function here has a interesting, we'll call it, interesting syntax. It says unit, and it has a parentheses with an arrow. So this syntax is called an arrow function. And the word unit in Kotlin is really odd to me. It's confusing anyway. The word unit simply means it's a void function. It's a function that doesn't return a value. So I'm still trying to grasp what unit actually means. I wouldn't have picked unit as my word for it, but it means void function. It's a function that does processing but does not return any results. Then the last item is also a toggle switch, which is a function as well. So this one is a unit function as well. So I'm going to insert some comments here. So let's put each of these parameters on a separate line. Normally you wouldn't have to do this, but since this is a tutorial, let's make it obvious. So separate these on separate lines, and then I'm putting in comments to show what each of them is supposed to do. Now there is still an error. As you can see up here, we're looking for a local variable called it. So it is some kind of a property or some kind of a data point. It's a string, it's a number, it's something. And so what we need to do down here is say that we are going to pass a string value when we do the conversion. And so now it has some kind of a value. So it is now defined as a string that will be sent from the user interface. Now it's interesting that we are passing functions as parameters. So we're used to probably passing around strings and integers as parameters, but you can pass a function as well. So this will call a function inside of the ViewModel. So right away, I'm going to start with the user interface parts. So down here in the curly brackets, this is the composables function that's executed whenever new data is sent to it. So we're going to say define your UI elements inside of here. The first thing I'll do is set a column, so that way the elements are all lined up nicely vertically. All right, so inside of this column, we're going to put a few things. I'm going to introduce the idea of a card. A card is a nice box that you can use with a little shadow behind it. We'll put the formatting in later. But what we're going to do is say this is where we do the inputting items. So let's just put a placeholder text called input stuff goes here. And then below that, we're going to have another text which shows us the results. So this text will show a string. And then finally, a button. And we're going to handle an onClick event on this button. And it will obviously do our conversion. So let's put in convert temp of 100 right now as a placeholder. And then the label on that button is called calculate. So this should get us something that looks like a reasonable UI. So let's test it out. All right, so now it's time to test this thing out. So we've got a few interface items. Let's go ahead and click the little button. And you can see I have a problem here. I got an error. It says duplicate class is found. Something with JDK7. I'm in the logcat here, and I'm not quite sure really what's going on. So if I were to start Googling this, I would come up with the answer. I did find the answer, so let's go and fix the problem. So just for troubleshooting's sake, here's how you would find the answer. You would take some piece of this error code and go into Google and find out. So I am suspecting that this model here is the problem. This was from Gradle. And I also added the items that says duplicate class is found. And I came up with Stack Overflow, of course, which brought me to a problem and a resolution. Let's go down and see if we can find the answer. So here, after reading, it says here, if you're using Kotlin version 1.7.2, you will be using Lifecycle version 2.5.1. Okay, let's go check to see what I have. And sure enough, I'm into Gradle, and I'm at 2.6.1. Let's just back that off from 2.6.1 to 2.5.1. I'm saving you a ton of time right now because that took me a while to resolve it. So when I run it, this time, magically, the problem is resolved, and I can see that my app is up and working. So here we go. We've got ourselves a simple user interface, and it looks like it needs some alignment and maybe a little bit of outlines. But at least we got it running. The first thing that I'm going to tackle is the column. I want to make it centered and fill up the whole screen. So let's go and add the horizontal alignment property. And it looks to me like we can get that from horizontal centered is what we're after. And then the modifier that we're looking for to make it vertically max size is called modifier maxed size. So let's see if that changes anything. Okay, it looks to me like I got the horizontal working. I don't see the column working as max size like I hoped it would. Next, let's go and check the title of our app. I'm going to add some padding to it. So let's put in a modifier to do that. and it's suggesting 16 dp. I'll start with that and see how it looks. The next is the styling. So I want it to be a little bit bigger text, so I'm going to use the style called headline medium, and then of course the text is the same. So let's do an update to see what that looks like. So there's a headline. It's a little bit bigger, and it's got some space around it. All right, so I promised you that this card does something special. Let's see if we can make that work now. So what I want to do is make this card have what's called an elevation. It's kind of a shadow, and then a foreground color. Wow, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Let's just go with a few simple ones. So the first suggestion that I get is called card defaults.elevation, and I think this is a little out of date. So let's erase the elevation and get the IntelliSense from Android Studio, and it says use card elevation. And so let's give it something bigger than 4. Let's go with 9. I don't know. Let's see if that's big enough. The next item is we want to do the colors. So let's go with colors equals and see what comes up here. So let's choose another option that comes here instead of colors. Let's do card colors. That's the one. And then inside of here, we're going to just put in a white color. So let's go color, and let's see, I'm looking for dot white. There it is. So we've got ourselves a card that has an elevation and a foreground color that is white. What does that do for my card? And let's see, I look at it up close. So you can see input stuff goes here. It does have a white background on it now, it looks like, and it has a shadowy figure around the edge. So what I want then is to give the space around this text right here where it says input stuff goes here. Let's put in a margin. So I'm just going to start typing margins. No, it's not margins, it's called paddings. And the padding we're going to set to 16 and rerun it. And hopefully we get a box around it. There we go. So now you can see input stuff here has a card around it. It's kind of neat, isn't it? It's user interface, a little bit artistic flair to it. Let's go modify the result now. So let's put in the property called text equals, and that way we can add some other things, such as a modifier. Let's do padding of 16, and let's make the style a bit bigger. So I'm going to use the material theme styling, and what I'm looking for is called headline medium. So suggestions aren't quite right here, but I got it is headline medium at the end. Let's do one more run to see what results come out of that, and you can see that the result is a bigger text now. So the last item that I'm going to modify is the text on the button. Instead of just the word calculate, I'm going to say convert to Celsius, and that will change depending on the set of the toggle switch. So that text will modify to Fahrenheit or Celsius depending on the state. So next up, I'm trying to get to this state here where instead of the input stuff goes here, you can see the card contains several things. It has the toggle switch, and it has an input form with some placeholder text in it. So we're going to code that right now. Okay, so the next thing is to replace the contents of the card. Right now we just have a string in there. So erase the text item, and we're going to put in 2 items. We're going to put in a switch and an outline text field so we can put some data in. So both of these things have to be distributed horizontally, which means that we have a row going on. So a row is like a column, except it runs horizontally. So let's put in row, and the first item is switch. So there's 2 properties for the switch. One is called checked, which is true or false. So we have a property called isFahrenheit, which is the Boolean value. And then the second item is a function, and it's called onChecked change, and that's going to be our toggle switch function that comes from the ViewModel. Then we're going to add a text field entry at the next line down. So it's called an outline text field, and we're going to have 2 items here. We have value, which is the contents of the text entry, and then a function. So whenever a letter changes in there, it's called onValueChange. And for right now, we're just going to leave it as an empty function as a to-do item. So after importing all these items, we should have ourselves a switch box and an outline text field. Now, as you can see, I'm importing the opt-in option for the outline text field. What did that do? If I go up to the top here, I'm going to find somewhere an opt-in. There it is, opt-in experimental 3 API. So when you do that, that's kind of indicating that this is a new item in Android Studio. You might not have to do that because you have a newer version and this has already been incorporated as standard practice. But at this moment, I have to say I'm going to opt in with an experimental API. So that means it could change in the future, and who knows, maybe the tutorial has a few minor tweaks that need to be done. Well, let's see what it looks like. I'm going to run it, and sure enough, we can see ourselves. We got a toggle, and now we got this thing called placeholder. And you notice I can't type anything in here yet. I'm typing on my keyboard. We haven't done anything with that function called onUpdate, so it's kind of invalid at this moment. A few more details to change on the appearance though. Let's get started with that. So let's go to the row item and do a few modifications there. First of all, we want to make sure that everything is vertically aligned, centered, so that way the row is nicely spaced. And also the modifier gives us the opportunity to add some space around the edge, padding. Let's see what that does. So I'm going to click the run button and see if the change is visible at all. So a little bit of extra space. So now let's go and work with the outline text field and add some properties there. So let's give some space. We're going to do multiple lines here. We're first of all going to add a label. So the label is going to tell the user what this text field is for. So I'm just going to say enter temperature. Let's give some padding inside here so we get a little more space around things. It's suggesting single line. Sure, I'll go with a single line input. And let's do some text style so we get it a little bit bigger than normal. And then a cool feature is called trailing icon. So we can add a little symbol to say what type of degree we're working with here. So are we going to work with Fahrenheit? If so, then we'll use 2109, else we'll use the Celsius symbol. Well, let's see what happens. I'm going to run this and take a look at my new improved text entry. So you can see that the label up here says enter temperatures, and then down here we've got the Fahrenheit right now. A good practice of mine is to try to indicate where the ending things are. You can see I'm going to put in end row and end card because you know, these nested brackets start to get kind of separated far apart. So this will help you out as your future self. Next, I'm going to allow us to do some editing, or we can add some items to the input field instead of placeholder. So we're going to invent a new variable called input text state. Doesn't exist yet, so there'll be some red errors. And then on the value changed, we're also going to invent another function called onTextChange, and we're going to provide it with a parameter called it. So whatever text was in the input is going to go to this function. So these two items need to be defined. So I'm going to go up to the top of, near the top of my main activity here, and I'm going to add some new variables. So right before the column area. So the first thing I'm going to do is define this variable called input text state. And I'm going to take the suggestion from my Copilot, and you can see that it says use the words here by, remember, and then the mutable state of. So I'm going to struggle here for a few minutes trying to get this thing imported correctly, but once I do, let's take a look at what it means. So let's start with mutable state of. That's the part that we worked with earlier. So mutable state of means that this thing will be a changeable value, and expect the user interface to respond to it when it changes. The word remember is a pretty cool feature that is often used with mutable state of. So let's say in the future the app is put into the background, or it is turned sideways, or somehow the operating system pauses the app. The word remember is a nice way for the operating system to keep track of what was in that input field. If you forget the word remember and you turn the phone sideways, the text field will blank out. It'll not remember what was in there. Because when you turn an app sideways, it essentially kills the app and restarts it. Kind of strange, but that's how they designed it in Android. And so remember is the way to keep that state during transitions. So the next thing is the function that will be triggered every time there is a new letter typed into there. So when you type in any number or letter, it's going to trigger onTextChange. And so the new value will then be assigned to the state called input text state. So these two pieces work together. So the state is the current value of what's in the text field, and then this method called onTextChange is triggered multiple times whenever typing is done. So theoretically, we should be able to run the app again. And let's go into the item that says temperature. I can put in values, and it looks like they are preserved there. So we're allowing the user to do some input. Now, what happens down here on calculate? Well, look at there. It does a number. Well, it looks like it's working. Is that actually done? So no, it's not working because I'm always using the default value of 100 when it works through there. So it's not reading the text yet, but I think that's what we're going to do next. So let's see if we can actually make that happen. Let's go down into our button. So this convert button, where was that at? That's near the bottom here. And it says here, convert temperature. Right now it's set as a default of 100. So instead of 100 in there, what we're looking for is input text state. So whatever number has been stuck into that text box is what we're going to send into the view model. Let's see if that works. I'm going to run this. And sure enough, we've got this thing working. So let's put in 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and the result is -17. Oh, that's nice. Let's put in 32 Fahrenheit, and we get 0. Pretty good. And let's see, I know 212 Fahrenheit should give us 100 Celsius. Now, what happens if I say hot and I choose convert? I'm going to get invalid input. So the try-catch thing seems to be working. So that's working. If I toggle it and type in something, let's say now we're in Celsius. So let's go with 0 Celsius, and that comes out with 32. Almost everything is working properly except this button. It always says convert to Celsius. And no matter what I do on this toggle switch, it always says the same thing. So we need to do some conditional formatting to make this text change depending on the state of this toggle switch. So I go down into the button area and delete the current text and just see what comes up for my typing suggestions. And sure enough, if it is set to is Fahrenheit, then we want to show a button that says convert to Celsius. Else, we'll show the other text which says convert to Fahrenheit. Okay, so now we're at some number. Let's try 100 degrees Fahrenheit, convert to Celsius is 37. And let's toggle that. Right now it's 100 Celsius, and we're going to convert to Fahrenheit, which is 212. Hey, it seems like it's working. Let's go with 0 degrees Fahrenheit and convert to, let's see, that was, I'm sorry, Celsius to Fahrenheit. Toggle it, and we're going to switch it back to Celsius, and there it is. So congratulations, you've completed this section here on view models, and what's coming up next is navigation. So in the next tutorial, we're going to have multiple screens with our Jokes app, and you'll be able to toggle between them, you'll be able to navigate, and so stick with me for another lesson in Android Studio.